Transcription and coding are two of the possible ways, often used together, to organize and get familiar with your data, to map it, to categorize and trace the concepts in it, concepts under investigation. Transcription is basically a recording on paper or in a Word document of some sort, the talk that occurred in oral interaction. The main call a researcher has to make is what level of detail is the most appropriate for their study. Phonetic transcription, that you can see here on your screen, can capture the finest details of pronunciations, intonations, lexical and grammatical features. But it is hard to read and hard to do. Indeed, it is not always necessary unless phonetic features are the target of your investigation. Another kind of transcription is using standard orthography, but still reflecting oral dialectal features through non-standard spellings. This kind of transcription is much easier to do, but it requires a judgment call on the part of the researcher and may produce the result of casting the speakers in an undesirable light. Finally, we can transcribe interactions using normal spelling and punctuation. While highly readable, this kind of transcription obscures dialectal features and sometimes also attitudes of the speakers. The examples you see here on your screen are all different levels of transcription of an interview with a victim of a house break-in in a small southern town. You can judge for yourself how the potential character of the speaker is reflected in the transcription. Transcription itself constitutes a form of analysis. Pause here for a moment. Look carefully at each transcription and see how it reflects the character of the speaker. The second call the researcher needs to make is how much of the data to transcribe. If you don't have much data, transcribing it all is desirable. If you have a lot of data, sometimes it is not possible to transcribe it in a timely manner. For example, conversation analysis style transcription can take up to an hour of transcribing time for 1 minute of interaction, especially if it's a multi-party interaction. You may therefore decide to transcribe part of the data, and then you need to decide which part is going to be most appropriate for you to transcribe. The final topic we will discuss today is data coding. Coding is a process of assigning a code or a tag to a phenomenon of interest in your data. Coding makes data more accessible and more analyzable because it helps you focus on what it is that you are investigating. And the best thing is that there isn't some esoteric mysterious list of codes you need to memorize. You get to create the tags that work for you in your own data analysis. Here are a few tips on how to come up with your codes. First, keep the code inventory simple. If you're doing a really big study, you may need 20 codes. Try not to go over. But for a smaller study like you're doing in this class, you might only need half a dozen at most. And while you are developing the codes for your data, be flexible. Be prepared to add or merge some codes as you get more familiar with your data and the phenomenon you are investigating is getting clearer to you. Knowing the context of your data will really help you in this task. But one of the greatest advantages in working in research teams is that you can do so-called reliability sessions. Each member of your team can code a bit of the data independently, and then you meet and discuss the codes, work out a common set that works to address the phenomena in question, and come up with a single list of codes that all of you can use. Putting your heads together allows you to come up with a more rigorous coding scheme, and as a result, with more dependable results of your study. Let's look at an example of coding from my own data from years ago. This is an image-enhanced, conversation analysis-based transcript of a bit of classroom interaction. The teacher, whom I here call Emma, calls on one of the students to do something with a task referred to as number 8. We know that she's selecting a particular student because she points to him and addresses him as Sir. In coding of the data, you will see that in the red box, I noted that this particular move is an initiation of a typical classroom exchange, The teacher initiates, the student responds, and the teacher evaluates the response. That is why you see an I in the coding column. It's the fourth from the top. I also know that in this move, the teacher selects the speaker, the code marked with 2 letter S's, speaker selection, and does so by means of a gesture and a general address term for men, sir. Both codes are marked in the coding column. You can see the rest of the codes for this excerpt as well, but even the first line is a good example of how you can do it. As you can see, you as a researcher are in control of the process, but once you've coded the data, you can start observing the patterns. It is this coding, for example, that allowed me to notice that in this particular class, the teacher always evaluated the students' responses positively in the same manner. She first praised the students through a positive adjective like good or correct. She then repeated and elaborated the student's answer, sometimes repeating first and elaborating next, and sometimes the other way around. But both the repetition and elaboration were always present. That allowed me to make a very important claim about this classroom interaction, both in terms of how the teacher presented the knowledge and how the students were orienting to what kind of answers were expected of them. You are now familiar with the basics of data analysis, so happy analyzing!